plethora of passages which I was about to get into right after this call. So if you have another question, make it, and when you're done, I'm going to go into the passages, because the Quran-only Muslims have a very strong case that the Quran does claim to be sufficient in of itself. Not one passage, but plethora of passages, both from the Meccan period and the Medinan period. And even that information is based on the Hadith, right? Clearly go out of its way that the Quran is a clear book, fully detailed, needing nothing outside of itself to explain it. And I'll give those passages in a moment. But if you have another question, ask me that. And then right after, I answer your question, I'll go into the data. Do you have another question?
Oh, yeah, here's my second question. My second question is, where does the Quran spell out monotheism? Mainly
Monotheism?
the first two.
Where does the Quran spell out? Now define what you mean by monotheism, because that's a little tricky, because there's a distinction between monotheism and Unitarianism. When you say monotheism, are you talking about as defined by the classical scholars, where they coined the term Tawheed, a term that is found in the Hadith, by the way, but not in the Quran, and the subsets of Tawheed? Because if you follow, especially the Salafi sect of Islam, Tawheed comes in three main categories. You have Tawheed al-Rububiyah, the oneness of Allah's lordship, that He's the sole Lord and sustainer of creation. Tawheed al-Uluhiyah, right? Uluhiyah, or also Ibadah, called Ibadah. And Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. Are you talking about that specifically? The categories of Tawheed? Is he on the phone? Did you guys hang up on him? Good job, my friends. Those of you controlling the phones. Excellent. I'm going to assume he meant Tawheed and its various subcategories. As far as the explicit term Tawheed, it does not appear in the Quran.
No.
As far as the Quran explicitly dividing Tawheed into three main categories, that's not found in the Quran. These are later formulations by Muslim scholars who claim that it's based on the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad. However, I dare say, and again I'm willing to debate any Muslim on this, that if you actually read the Quran clearly and the Sunnah clearly, the Quran actually presents multiple entities as divine beings who are partners with Allah. One of whom is Muhammad, another of whom is the Spirit of Allah. And I'm challenging any Muslim to a formal debate. Debate me on the topic, does Islam teach pure monotheism? It does not. So as far as your question is concerned, there are passages that Muslims extrapolate to try to prove that the Quran teaches Tawheed in its various categories. But the same Quran also contains statements that violate monotheism, and especially the Sunnah. Now here's my open challenge to any Muslim who wants to debate me on this topic formally. I'm inviting any Muslim to debate me formally on the topic, does Islam teach pure monotheism? And I guarantee you that when the debate is done, people will see that the farthest thing that Islam does is promote pure monotheism. I hope that answered your question. Now, Lord willing, I'll go into the data demonstrating that the Quran testifies to its own self-sufficiency. But before I do that, did you have any